What's up, everybody? We are the Real Cinema Squad. My name is Ty, that's Roman, and that is Austin. And we are going to be talking about a hot topic right now, and that is the Acolyte. We have already reviewed episodes 1 and 2, and I can tell you there are a lot of things that we have issues with in this show, and we want to dive into a few of those issues, specifically a few articles and interviews that have come out with the showrunner Leslie Headland and also Kathleen Kennedy. Some comments that are just quite frankly disturbing in our opinion, and we're going to expound on, why that is. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump into this interview that was had recently that has stirred up some outrage, and rightfully so. So what's coming as the outrage is recently Leslie Headland described the Acolyte as the gayest Star Wars to date, a fact that might anger a lot of fans. And it has angered a lot of fans, and it's not for the reason you would think. It's not because we're racist, sexist, bigots, or homophobes, because we got love for everybody here. The reason is that this stuff is being forced. It's obvious that it is all being forced down our throats, whether we like it or not. Instead of just telling a great story from a world far, far away, we are getting forced gender identity politics. So she goes on, and so she says, "We are happy to report that Acolyte is arguably the gayest Star Wars yet. Happy Pride Month." And then they go on to expound on this even more. They say, "Is this going to be a talking point?" And she goes, "No, I don't think so. Yet people have told me that it's the gayest Star Wars, and frankly, I'm really into it. I think that Star Wars is so gay already. I mean, have you seen the fits? We do like, look how gay this is, and then end each other and then send each other a reference photo." She immediately continued and added an anecdote of her own, which resulted in laughter. "And are you telling me with a straight face that C-3PO is straight? I think it's canon that R2-D2 is a lesbian." So we're literally talking about R2-D2 being a lesbian, a machine being a lesbian, C-3PO being gay, and that nerds are scared of gay people. That was another thing that was brought up in the interview. So this is literally just being forced down our throats, and they wonder why it's tanking. Like it's just it really rubs me the wrong way when they just want to go ahead and label us these homophobic, racist bigots because we don't agree with their storytelling. We're disappointed that they're breaking canon, that they're forcing these politics and agendas down our throat. All we want is good character development, a good story, something that we can all just come together and enjoy like we used to. But anyways, I'm going to stop for a second. I want to hear Austin and Roman what you guys think.
Yeah, Ty, that interview with Leslie Headland, I've unfortunately watched that interview multiple times because some other YouTubers we follow, like Star Wars Theory, Critical Drinker, and the like, they've pretty much everybody's been talking about this. That's a big Star Wars fan. And you see that video, and the interviews aren't even about Star Wars. The interviews aren't even about the legacy of Star Wars, not even about how this show is continuing that legacy, not even about the story and the excitement for the fans. I've never seen an interview that didn't talk about the actual property. I mean, they talked about the property obviously in like broad terms, but it was all based on what their personal life preferences had to do with Star Wars when they're just like making up stuff. I mean, the C-3PO R2-D2 thing, you take two beloved characters that literally are one robots, but they're beloved characters by all ages. You start seeing, what pisses me off is that you're going to have kids out there who are watching this interview or seeing this kind of stuff because kids are all over TikTok, and they're going to legitimately either believe that because they don't really know Star Wars too much, or you're going to have kids that love Star Wars and start believing those things, and you're indoctrinating kids who love Star Wars or any IP for that matter to believe these things that aren't true about these stories that have been around for 40 plus years. And it just irks me that we can't leave that out of there. Like what she does in private, or what any of those actors do in private, obviously we can't control. We have no say over, whatever. It's when you are taking something that you have a personal responsibility to uphold a legacy, and something that fans, I mean, we're the ones paying for them to have a job, to keep making this content. And there's a reason that sales have gone down in merchandising. There's a reason that ratings are tanking. There's a reason that majority of young kids these days are not interested in Star Wars like we were, because the content isn't interesting enough. And then on top of that, you're pissing off the fan base that has stuck with you, thinking that, hey, we have hope that this is going to get better. And then you spend the entire time not even actually talking about the things that we care about, not because we don't, like what you're doing in private or your personal life or whatever, or what you believe. It's because you're not honoring the storyline that has been around for this many years. I mean, this frankly started with Last Jedi, and this is why the fan base is so divided, just because they set a precedence of not listening to what George had set up. And even besides that, with George, I mean, like, you can have your own, style moving forward, but at least honor the storyline and the characters, and don't just crap on all of them. I'm still kind of flabbergasted by it all, because it just doesn't make any sense to why, like, you wonder why people are turned off.
Right.
I'll speak to something that both of you said, but before I get a little bit more into why this is such a failure from a writer's perspective. Ty, you mentioned that Leslie Headland said, no, I don't think this is a talking point. And yet that's all that any of the interviews that any of them have done this entire time have been about. That's been the focus of every interview, every talking point, everything that's come out of their mouths this entire time. You mentioned that, they have a responsibility, and it speaks a little bit from a writer's perspective, that when you take on something as big as Disney has with Star Wars, even though Disney's in charge of it now, it started from George Lucas. You don't have the complete freedom to tell whatever story you want to tell. You can take your creative direction, but you have to do it under the umbrella that has already been established by George Lucas. And that's where Disney has failed in pretty much all of their projects, except for maybe Ahsoka and the first couple seasons of The Mandalorian. Is they even admitted when they first acquired Disney that they were throwing out everything we knew and loved about Star Wars. And we've even had some comments on our Star Wars videos on this channel, people saying George Lucas doesn't understand Star Wars. It's like, what the heck are you created about? Exactly. And it's like, you don't understand anything if you think that George Lucas doesn't understand, because nobody understood it before George walked through the door, because it didn't exist. And so it's clear that Leslie Headland and Kathleen Kennedy, and Ty, I'll let you read the Kathleen Kennedy interview before I keep going from a writer's perspective, that they're forging their own way, everything else be darned. And when things go badly and they can't see past their own hubris of making bad decisions, hiring bad writers, hiring bad directors, putting out a bad product, they throw words out there like racist, bigot, misogyny, toxic, to cover up the fact that they're unable to take responsibility for their own shortcomings.
It is truly ridiculous. You look at some of these flops from a fan base perspective, like they are trashing some of these shows and movies.
Acolyte,
and they're doing every
percent audience score, a 27% audience score,
and they're doing everything they can, you would think, to save face, but no, they're not. They're doubling and tripling and quadrupling down and saying, I don't care what y'all think. Y'all are wrong. Y'all are the problem. We are right. We are above you. We're going to continue doing this no matter how much money we lose, because Disney's got billions and billions and billions of dollars apparently just to light on flames. It just baffles me.
That's
and to that point, I'll just read a headline from an article, just to the point of people thinking, oh, George didn't understand Star Wars is the way it was supposed to be. That the headline, it was from CBR.com, and it said the Acolyte features the best depiction of the Force since the original trilogy. And I read that and I thought, well, that's interesting, considering that George Lucas himself just said that no one at Disney understands the Force.
Yeah. And this whole thing, we're not saying all this because this is the first time and we're completely shocked. This is just the pinnacle of years and years of Lucasfilm specifically, and we'll get into other fandoms as well. But Lucasfilm specifically, every time something has failed that has been beloved, they essentially blame us. And I think it happened with Kenobi when you bring back two of the biggest characters in Star Wars, and that didn't go well. And then you have a split on Andor. A lot of people didn't like Ahsoka, even though I know me and Roman did. But this all started with the sequels too. I mean, Force Awakens, everybody was excited that Star Wars was back. Then you have Last Jedi. Last Jedi crapped on Luke Skywalker, destroyed the characterization. They made Han Solo a deadbeat dad. They did so many things that were just completely off base and not from what fans were used to in the storylines, especially in the expanded universe. And then from then on, since the beginning, we see that critic ratings are high, possibly because they were paid to say so. And then you have audience ratings that are super low. And since that, it's always been, let's trash the fans. It's their fault. They don't know what they want. They hate all that kind of stuff. And granted, there's a lot of fans that hated the prequels. So Star Wars hate has always kind of been there. I get it. However, it's not always only Star Wars that we've seen this in recently. So when you attack your fans off the basis that you think that's going to continue to get them to watch it, that's the worst marketing move in the history of marketing moves. Why would you hate on somebody that is going to pay to watch your thing or pay to buy your stuff? Because who's doing that now are those minority of people who are now bandwagon fans over this period of Disney, Star Wars, Disney, Marvel, all that stuff. And the minority that actually wants to listen to the agenda preaching.
When it is clear that obviously this show, The Acolyte, has some divisive things that you could take politically or gender related, but when Star Wars fans on both sides of the aisle, however you want to look at it, are saying this is just plain bad, it becomes clear when you have something as big a disparity as a 96 Rotten Tomato score and a 27 audience score, somebody's not telling the truth. And it has also become clear with that this is not a man versus woman argument. It's not a gay versus straight argument. It's an argument of good writing and good production versus bad writing and production. And that's what we're looking at with The Acolyte. And it goes back to Star Wars unable to take responsibility.
And you know what's funny about all this is that I've seen a lot of comments out there saying, "Oh, well, Star Wars has always been political, so why you care about the political agendas being pushed?" Star Wars story has always been political from a in-world perspective, but George wrote this and yes, the stormtroopers were inspired after Nazis and the soldiers there. George has even been credited for saying that the Vietnam War and the mishandling that governments and even America was complicit in that, definitely influenced some of the stuff that was happening in Star Wars. However, the political nature of Star Wars was not about woke and about gender identity and social justice movements and all that kind of stuff. What Star Wars was always about, he literally has said that it's about what happens when governments become dictatorships and when bad people think they are actually doing what is good, and so they turn into the evil thing that they thought that they were protecting against. And so when you look at corporations that are run by board members and run by people who don't care because they're still getting paid and they're making decisions that have nothing to do with the actual content that they picked up, they're turning into those things that George wrote Star Wars about.
Yep. And it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting that's not all corporations. We've seen in several other instances where look at what happened with the Sonic movie. Fans didn't like what Sonic originally looked like, and the studio listened to them and be like, you know what, we made a mistake. And so they fixed Sonic, and that's been a huge success for them. And look at Ryan Reynolds' first outing as Wade Wilson in X-Men Origins. They completely changed the character. He didn't have a costume. They sewed his mouth shut. He wasn't wisecracking. and the audience was like, we don't like this, and the studio was like, you know what, you're right, here's and Ryan Reynolds himself fought for it as well. So it's not just like, oh, studios can make the last call because they're the studios and they know what it is. It's clear that it's a matter of being able to see your own flaws as human beings in the industry. And also Star Wars Star Wars under Disney has proven that they not only can't make compelling characters, because that's what we don't like about Acolyte right now in the first 2 episodes, it's not very compelling, but they don't nurture the ones we already know. They have either killed off, destroyed, or cast aside every good character that they've held on to. Look what they did to even the new characters. Finn in Force Awakens, they completely threw him to the side. Obviously, what they did to Han, Leia, and Luke in Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, they don't know what they're doing when it comes to characters and nurturing characters. They don't know how to write them or nurture them at all.
Here's the prevailing theme here, Roman, and it just doesn't stop at Star Wars, because this is our world that we live in today.
Amen.
When I have an issue, and it's my issue, instead of taking responsibility for my issue and trying to look in the mirror and say, you know what, I'm kind of jacked up, I need to fix myself. Mm-hmm. No, I am going to attack your character because that's going to make me feel better. Yeah. I'm going to somehow justify all my actions, all my wrongdoings by saying, oh, you're the problem. I'm not the problem. Yeah. It's the transfer of blame. It's our America's greatest pastime. Transfer the blame to somebody else. And that's what we're doing here. And that's what we will continue to do, apparently, unfortunately.
You know, the thing is that we've seen culture shift a lot since we were kids. And I mean, things obviously were going on that weren't great the entire history of humanity, but we're seeing a bunch of sinful humans trying to prove that they have the moral high ground in different things instead of taking responsibility, like you guys said. But it becomes a narcissistic thing when you think that you know everything better than other people instead of actually listening to others and how you can improve. I mean, at the end of the day, as you know, us three, we're brothers. Iron sharpens iron. We're there for each other. You hold each other accountable. Those type of things. That's a typical human thing. Is like if you listen to others and you are held accountable by your actions, you're going to do better in the long run. But you have. I mean, it's just not like you said. It's not just Star Wars. You saw a shift in Hollywood when there was a clear divide between what was wanted and what was just being paid for to be pushed. And it's a miracle that those things that Roman mentioned, like Sonic and X-Men and even Zack Snyder's Justice League, got made the way they were supposed to because of the fans. That's a rare oddity. And I don't think there's enough people in those positions of creativity anymore that are willing to do the things for that passion and the reasons they got into the industry in the first place. People like Jon Favreau got into the industry because he was a fan.
Yep.
But the point is, there are those people, and it's funny that you mentioned Jon Favreau because there's rumors and reports that he kept certain things a secret about Mandalorian and different things from Kathleen Kennedy. Yeah. Like, I think wasn't it Luke in The Mandalorian was reportedly kept a secret from Kathleen Kennedy, and when she found out, she was angry because Jon Favreau knew he secretly had to do right by the character of Luke because Kathleen wouldn't have let him.
Because he made a white male awesome. That's why. Yep. And I know that's going to probably piss off a lot of people because that's not the agenda in 2024. But that's why.
This whole video is going to be unpopular.
Yeah, because bottom line is Luke is awesome. But what is our society trying to do? They're trying to emasculate men and make them this weak character. Nothing like what God called men to be. Mm-hmm. Leaders, strong. Like, there's a reason why it was the knight in shining armor, and men came in, and there's just genetically things different about men and women, and there's a lot of amazing things. My wife, I can attest, she is an incredible creature that God created, and I wouldn't want to change a thing about her. I'm so thankful that she was fearfully and wonderfully and uniquely made. on purpose, with a purpose, for a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And I stand by that. But so are males, and we shouldn't have to apologize for being male. We should never have to apologize for being a man or acting like a man. And I'm not talking about toxic masculinity. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about leading with love.
That's the thing, Ty, is that, you know, we're not talking about the people. Like, there's obviously people out there that are hateful towards other people, who actually mean harm towards other people, who are discriminatory towards other people. We're not talking about those people. We're talking about genuine people who are fans, are fathers, are husbands, on the women's side, that are wives, that are sisters, that are all these people who make up society and make up what, was created, and the differences between everybody, which makes unique. We were created uniquely. I mean, like you said, scripture says we're fearfully and wonderfully made. And so we're made in the image to be unique, but in the image of God, to do things that are going to help us prosper. And so when you start tearing down those, they're not even archetypes. When you start tearing down that truth. And I mean, that's what a lot of these like hero journeys and these movies were based off of, was just this idea that gave people hope. That's why it was universal. It didn't matter what gender they were. It didn't matter what they looked like, any of the things. It was all about this hero's journey. And now we're seeing a degrading of morals to some extent, to where heroes aren't really heroes. There's just all this, like, I mean, like I said, we're all imperfect. Nobody's perfect in humanity. However, characters in movies and in TV shows used to always have this quality that was obviously a little bit larger than reality, because it gave you hope and it gave you something to aspire to, versus now where everything is super gray and there's no good versus evil. It's just this, like, everything can be true at the same time.
The lines are blurred.
Everything can't be true at the same time. And so it's like when you start getting into that with things like Star Wars and things like Marvel and any other thing, it just, why are people going to gravitate to that when they can't look up to anything?
And let's just call it like it is. There might be some people that watch this video and be like, oh, well, of course they're going to talk about masculinity. It's three guys talking about Star Wars. Women like Star Wars too. And I'm not making this up. I saw this I saw this comment on one of the articles with one of the headlines talking about the Acolyte. It was a female Star Wars fan, and she said, I am a woman. I love Star Wars, but I hate these female characters. These one-dimensional, only have one reason, these agenda characters. So it's female Star Wars fan. Kathleen Kennedy is so quick to talk about, our audience is so male dominated that, they're toxic in this. It's like, no, there are a lot of female Star Wars fans and they don't like it either. And even if the fan base is mostly male dominated, your fan base and you're still seeking to make them angry. So that's just bad. That's just bad management.
I mean, yeah, and it's possible that the fan base is super male dominated. I mean, nerd culture has become more widespread, more mainstream over the several years. But there's a reason that characters like Leia, Padme, and Ahsoka are so well loved, because they're well thought out characters. They're characters that actually have their own unique personalities. They've done great things. They have brains, and they actually think for themselves, and they go out and do amazing things just like the other characters do. And they're on equal footing with those other things. And so, Ahsoka is one of the only female characters right now that actually is well thought out and has a story and has a legacy. So when you have other characters that are introduced that are either being killed off in the first 7 minutes of a show, or that, have very one-dimensional lines that don't really go anywhere, what are you going to do with that? I mean, that's what drives me crazy on no matter what character it is that you're so focused on just trying to tell a certain, agenda story that you have, that everything else gets messed up because of that. Like, the character development is out the window. It's just like, it's like AI's writing scripts at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I grew up dressing as Luke Skywalker, dressing as Anakin Skywalker. My sister wore her hair like Leia, wanted to be Padme. My wife dressed up as Padme for Halloween. I dressed up as Anakin. We dressed up my son as Yoda. That's the fandom. That's the nostalgia. That's what we want. We come together, we enjoy these things. It shouldn't be all of this crap. We want this stuff to go away. It's so toxic, and I hate it.
It's become more about a statement than than it has about substance.
And that's everything. Everything's a statement these days. We're not just talking about Star Wars. We're not just talking about.
We're talking about Hollywood.
Everything is a statement. And you see these videos of these Comic-Cons, or you go to Comic-Cons, or you see people out there and you're talking about Star Wars or any IP, Marvel, we'll name it. These people are just there for the love of what it is. And it doesn't matter who they are. They're there talking about it, and they love the stuff. They gravitate towards people who just want to talk about the fandom, talk about the story. They don't care about anything else that's going on in that person's life, or anything that is going on in the world in terms of like things that are being preached and that kind of stuff. It's all just about, hey, we've liked this thing since we were a kid, and you like it too, so let's be friends and let's talk about it.
Here, look, at the Real Cinema Squad, we're just three dudes that love to talk about TV and love to talk about movies. And at the end of the day, you might not agree with everything we say, and that's okay. You're entitled to your opinion, and we welcome your opinions. We welcome your comments. We love them. We appreciate them. We appreciate feedback.
We wouldn't be this passionate if we didn't care.
Exactly. And that's the reason we're talking like we're talking, is because we do care, and we just want to see these characters that we know and love honored properly. And these shows are just not honoring the Jedi. They're not honoring Lucasfilm. They're not honoring the things that we grew up on and we came to love and cherish.
They're not honoring George.
Yeah.
You know what saddens me, just to close it out, is just the thing that saddens me the most is that majority of the time you get on the internet or see any videos, you see people complaining or hating. And I'm not all about that. I want to enjoy something regardless if I don't like it or not. But I don't like that most people are just assuming that things are going to be bad just for the sake of what's being said out there. I would like to get back to a place to where fans are excited about a property, excited that it's going to give us the same excitement that we had as a kid, to where we rushed to the movies to see it, where we bought the books, where we bought the toys, that kind of stuff. And I would love that for the next generation too. I would love that for your kids, Ty. I would love that for my future kids. Same with you, Roman. And, I worry sometimes that's not going to happen, because we're going to show them the old stuff, because that's where all the good stuff is, if they keep on going down this direction. So
we can only hope that one day they'll get their senses and start listening to the fans, and maybe we'll get a product in the future that will make us all appreciate it again. But until then, we are the Real Cinema Squad. Roman, Austin, Ty, signing off.